Welcome everybody to the 100th episode of Talking Away The Taboo. I am Dr. Aimee Baron, and I am thrilled to bring you an incredibly special episode where we're going to go back and bring you all of your favorite guests. Okay, maybe not all of them, but so many of them. There are our top 6 or 7 people, and maybe a few surprises here and there, that we're going to be bringing you.
This episode is sponsored by our friends, SR. We know who you are, and we are deeply grateful for your support.
I'm going to bring on the first one right now. It's Aliza Abrams Konig. And Aliza, who is our resident surrogacy expert, is here to share a little bit about her life. And I know that you have an incredible update. So first of all, say hello to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining at this hour. Thanks for having me, Amy. I am not wearing makeup because my life update is that we have a 2.5-month-old, and she just went to sleep about 10 minutes ago. So you're lucky I got a shades on.
I was going to say, you do not see the good news about, so now we're doing this live where we're doing video, but the good news about the podcast, no one actually has to see anything, which is the beauty of it.
Totally.
So Aliza, when you and I last spoke here, you talked about your entire journey of being single, of getting married, not exactly when you were expecting to, meeting your husband, who is amazing, and also this journey of your kidney disease and having a kidney transplant, and then realizing that for you, in order to be able to have a family, it was going to involve surrogacy. And so just give us the then, and then bring us up to speed. I know now you have a 2.5, I know you have a 2.5-month-old, and everyone else also knows, but tell us about the last number of years.
Yeah. Excuse me. So like you said, 5.5 years ago now, at this point, I had a kidney transplant. My mom was watching live. Hi, Mom. She donated her kidney to me. And it was in that time when that was all happening, it happened actually pretty quickly. I was told that it would be really unsafe for me to carry a baby. But I actually found out that I didn't have fertility issues, which was reassuring, but at the same time, incredibly frustrating, because it was like, what do you mean I can do this, but I couldn't do it? And so simultaneous to getting set up for my transplant, I began the surrogacy process with my husband of finding an agency and finding a surrogate. And thank God we did find a surrogate fairly quickly. And what we thought would move quickly, it took about 2 years for our son to be born. And our son is emphatic that he's 4.25, but he's actually 4.5 at this point. But he's having a hard time getting to that halfway point. And then I would say about 1.5 years after he was born, we started looking into a second journey, because my doctors said there was no way that I could carry a baby, even though they had originally told me 1 year post-transplant, maybe I would have a baby, I would be able to carry a baby. But I actually had a really rough 1.5 years, I would say. After my transplant, I was in and out of the hospital 6 times. At one point, I was there for a month. And the only thing that I kept saying to myself was if I had a child right now, I don't even know how we would have survived. So as angry as I was at the time, you got to see God's hand in that and say, okay, so it was all about the right timing. And we started that process. I remember Prim 21, so whatever month that was, but let's say March 2021, we were about 1 year into COVID. We actually had interviewed a new surrogate. We got really far with her. We had paid for her to go for medical screening, and we had really thought she was going to be an amazing surrogate. And literally, as we were about to sign contract, she pulled out. And it was really hard. It set us back about 1.5 years in addition, until we found a new agency and found a new surrogate. And we lost $25,000 in that process.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think they literally refunded us $1,500. It was crazy.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so nice.
It wasn't even worth the stamp, But but thank God we went with a new agency who was phenomenal, and I'll give them a shout out, Surrogate Solutions. I recommend them to everybody. And we were matched with another surrogate, which, let's say this upcoming December will be 2 years. And we went through the process all over again, getting to know her, getting her cleared and medical screenings and all that kind of stuff. And thank God, our daughter was born on May 22nd, just 2.5 months ago. There's a lot that I'm skipping because I know our time is short. But it was this journey was a little bit shorter, in the sense that instead of it taking 2 years, it took about 1.5 years until our daughter was born. But thank God she's delicious and healthy. She was born 22 minutes before my 40th birthday. So it was the greatest present I ever could have asked for.
I remember that.
Yes. Initially before we were expecting our baby, I said to my husband, I'm like, it's my 40th. I would like a tennis bracelet. And then we took on this journey and I was like, okay, it's fine. We don't have any money for that. Just keep it. And thank God. So our daughter was born, and it was, parts of our journey were similar to the last one and parts were very different. But I would say also over the last 4.5 years, the surrogacy world has just like exploded in the Jewish community, which is just incredible. This week alone, last week, I guess, 2 baby girls were born to people in our WhatsApp group and our community, which is amazing. There's bringing a total of 4 babies just since our daughter was born this summer.
Wow.
Which is really great.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, thank God.
Okay. Wait, hold on. Yes, all of the amazing things, but and mazel tov to you. I mean, I've wished that to you personally, but now we're going to do it live in front of an audience.
Thank you.
Can you give people, I think we spoke about it a little bit, but can you give people a window into when we say that you're our surrogacy expert, and you're not only our surrogacy expert, you're basically, I feel like the world on some level, like Jewish fertility surrogacy expert. Can you just give people a window into what you do in this WhatsApp group that you referenced, and like the kinds of things that you're doing literally on a daily basis?
Absolutely. Thank you. It's actually funny. I spoke in Teaneck 2 weeks before our daughter was born. And Rabbi Rothwax, he was shul hosted me at Beth Aaron. He said to me, so are you the only one that speaks on this topic? And I said, I've basically got the corner on the market, and it's not that I am looking to be the leading expert on surrogacy, but I really feel together with my husband that, this was the path that we had to go on, and I need to use this information to help other people. And what we did was, shortly after our son was born, the first person reached out, and it was very like, is it okay? Can she reach out to you? This and that. And I was like, yeah, I guess so, and it just went from there because one person heard that I spoke to somebody, then another person. So what we've done is created a community. We have 80 people in the WhatsApp chat right now. And I literally have, I would say, 1 to 3 calls a week with people interested in surrogacy or in the middle of a process. Now there are women reaching out to me who want to be surrogates, Jewish women, which is a whole nother topic.
Yep.
And the group is an incredible, it provides 2 services, I would say. One is information. This is a really isolating experience, especially if, you've never met somebody else who's done surrogacy before, which so many of us never had before we went on this journey ourselves. So when you have a question, this is a really simple question. Should I send my surrogate a Christmas gift? What should I send her and her kids? Is games a gift? Is popcorn a gift? Am I supposed to send her jewelry? Like all these kind of what seem like so irrelevant, but are really important when you're trying to build a relationship with someone who's carrying your child. People talk about what agencies to use. People talk about compensation and things like that. And again, there's no one platform for this information. And certainly in the Jewish community, there's no other platform. So it's really, really helpful. And then the other piece is it really creates community. There are people who really don't tell anybody else in their world, in their family, that they're going through this, except for the people in our group. So instead of feeling like you're holding this secret by yourself and you have no one to turn to, you have a group of people who know exactly what you're going through and are going through it with you. So many of us were expecting babies at the same time. And honestly, most people didn't even know because people still keep it really quiet. But we're all celebrating this together, and it gives a lot of strength and chizuk to the others who are waiting to get to that point when we share mazel tov wishes to each other, which is really beautiful. And we're also there for each other. Someone in the group just this week, had a really challenging experience with her surrogate, and she was running by the whole group what kind of language she should put into a letter that she was sharing. So again, it's a sounding board, and that's just really incredible for people.
Right.
And the other thing, I do is in all these phone calls, I meet with every single person that is interested in, and it really has become an international experience. I learned how to say surrogacy in Hebrew. Surrogate is pundakait, I think. I don't even know. I had a Zoom call with an Israeli couple. I speak Hebrew. I do not speak scientific Hebrew. And I'm like, I don't even know the word for embryos. I think it's like embryo, whatever, and just like trying to help people who are all over the world go through surrogacy. And there's obviously in all these different countries, there are different laws. And I'm like slowly becoming an expert on the craziness that it is. But, just trying to help people find other people who may have gone through the experience in their country is also helpful.
Right. I have to tell you that I was at an event tonight, actually, where I ended up like just chatting with the woman who was standing next to me. And she said, "Oh, you're Aimee Baron." And she said, "Oh, I've been speaking to you because you gave me Aliza's name. And I'm Aliza, and she's amazing. And she's been helping out my daughter." And on and on, just like randomly, the woman I was literally standing next to. So you are really permeating and spreading those tentacles, exactly as you said, all over the world.
Thank God.
Okay. As we're we're doing these short little snippets tonight, just to give people a little bit of a flavor and an update as to where you are. Is there anything, as we close out your section, is there anything that you've learned? I mean, I know there's 1,000 things that you've learned, but something that you want to give to the community, you want to say to them now about like aspects of surrogacy, parts of your journey, any real piece that you want to share with them that you've learned in the last number of years now as, thank God, a mother of two who has been through this process twice and who advises countless people on a weekly basis. What are your thoughts?
I would tell people, don't be afraid to research surrogacy. If you're experiencing endless amounts of, pregnancies that aren't coming through, aren't successful pregnancies, I know that it's very expensive. I tell people you need to have about $150,000 available, but there is not necessarily grants available that you can just get money and never repay it, but there are interest-free loans in communities, in Hebrew Free Loan Society that are available to people. And when I speak to people who say they've been trying for 10 years, 18 years, whatever, to have a child, even if it's 2 years, and they don't know what to do or where to turn, I really feel that surrogacy can be the answer for people. And if they want to even just understand what it's about, to please reach out. And then the other thing that I want to say is that I get a lot of actually inquiries from friends of people who themselves have children, but they have a friend who hasn't had a child. And they turn to me for like, how do I talk to this person? How do I share this information with this person? So my advice is, here's an example. A few months ago, not even so long ago, there was like a post going around, Jewish baby immediately needs to be adopted. You probably saw it, right?
Yep.
So 1.5 million people shared it. And I think probably in like 4 minutes that baby, thank God, was adopted, or somehow that worked out really quickly. So somebody reached out to me and said, what should I do? How should I share this with my friend who has no children? And I said, you know what you can do? You could just write, I know you have a really large network. I thought I'd share this with you in case you wanted to share it further. And let that person take that information.
I love that. Beautiful.
Thank you. So just be like, this really resonated with me. I just wanted to share it. I don't know if you've heard of her or this or whatever it is. And just like without giving your 2 cents, you're giving your 2 cents, or you're sharing resources and information in like a relatively sensitive way. So that's what I would suggest to people. And believe me, people know that they don't have children, so you don't have to remind them.
Oh, yes. Thank you for that caveat, because I wasn't so sure that people here knew. I'm hoping that we have a captive audience and everyone does know that. But just in case, yes, one more time, if people don't have children, they know that they don't have children.
Yeah.
And I'll go even further than more likely they've already reached out to many doctors and gone down lots of different paths to try to figure that out. So
totally.
Yes. Okay, Aliza, thank you so much.
My
Mazel
pleasure.
tov again.
Thank you.
You should just keep going from strength to strength to strength, and be able to help the countless number of people that you're helping. It is such an honor to work with you and to watch you do everything that you do.
Thank you, Aimee, and thank you for all you're doing for the greater community. And everybody that's listening, make your donations.
Thank you. Thank you. Make your donations. Okay. Okay. So what we're doing now is Lisa's going to hop off, and we are now going to be bringing on Esty Perman. Esty is the Chabad Shlocha in Kansas City, and she spoke to us at a time in her life where she had one child and she was really desperate to have another. She was dealing with secondary infertility. I think here she is. Hi, Esty. How are you? It is
Hey,
so
Amy,
nice
good.
to see you again, like this, like this. We still have not yet met in person, but one of these days that's gonna change. Um, so Esty, we met Esty. I was telling everyone, you can go back and listen to her episode. We'll link that later on. We met Esty when Esty was dealing with secondary infertility. She already had her daughter, and she spoke all about her journey. And so she's here now. She had one of our most popular episodes to give us an update on her life and tell us how she's doing now. So Esty, how are you?
Thank God. So I was actually thinking when I was sitting down, I was trying to find where in my house to do this live. I don't do very many lives. And I was like, where did I do it last time? And I remember that I was in Florida. It was COVID. It was like a year into COVID. And we had taken a summer vacation. We like rented an Airbnb with my sister-in-law in Florida. And I remember that I had like set it up on the dining room table in this Airbnb somewhere in Florida. So a long time has passed since then. That was when we were willing to take like a 22-hour road trip because we only had our 4-year-old and she was relatively easy to entertain. Thank God. Yep. She was just, it was one 4-year-old. Since then, we've had lots of changes in our life, thank God, all positive. About a year and a half, I would say, after that last live, I got pregnant. I guess a year and a bit later, I got pregnant with
who is in the picture with
son.
Your daughter behind you. Yeah.
Yeah, that picture. And then on his first birthday, I found out that I was pregnant with our now almost 8-month-old daughter. Thank God. So thank God. A lot of blessings in our life that we try really hard not to take for granted. I can't say that much really changed. So my diagnosis, for anybody that didn't listen to the original one, I dealt with a case of Asherman syndrome, which is cervical scarring. And since that live with you, Aimee, I've gotten so many people that have reached out to me and that have gone, to meet with the doctor that I met. But and then after I dealt with that, which I thought was going to solve all my problems, I dealt with that when my daughter was like 2. I had a diagnosis of lean PCOS, which is super common. A lot of people are diagnosed with PCOS. I think a lot of people prematurely freak out about it, I want to say, as in I see a lot of people panicking, and PCOS is it's such a range, this diagnosis that can mean nothing. There can be people who are diagnosed with PCOS their whole life and have no problem conceiving. There can be people who have, a mild PCOS diagnosis and have a really, hard time conceiving. So I think it's important for people to, create their own story, I guess, and not to panic too much about it. But I did, a lot of basic PCOS treatments for like 2.5 years and just didn't work. For no reason that we can really tell. Even after I switched providers, who eventually was like the doctor that we call him our Angel Rafal, who was the right fit. But yeah, and then eventually, I guess God just decided that the time was right. And here we are.
I guess now looking back, I mean, you are in a very different position as a mother of 3, and thank God you are in this position. Looking back, you had decided to go public. You had a 4-year-old plus and still had not had any other kids. And in your world, that was not common. And do you have any regrets? I know you said that people spoke to you then afterwards about Asherman's, and then were able to seek the treatment that they really needed because they were dealing with a similar situation. I guess my question is, do you have any regrets about being public about your story? And then now having 2 other children, like, does that feel almost like that piece of your life doesn't matter anymore? Do people kind of, do you think about it differently? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I definitely don't have any regrets for sharing what I shared. I can say that I've had a very hard time finding my footing on sharing publicly since then. Only because I'm a pretty sensitive person, I think, and I'm always kind of hypersensitive to causing anybody else pain. And I've found it really hard to find that balance between just, the way I just write basically about my life and whatever is going on in my life. And I found it a little challenging to, to walk the line between sharing about the happy chaos, thank God, in my life right now without hurting anybody else, while also being sensitive to, to everybody else's story and my own story. So I do often find myself like checking back hard facts, I'll be like, wait, she was 5.5. Like, that's a fact. Like, the fact was that I did try for this many years, you know what I mean? Kind of to try to validate to myself that the struggle was real, because I'm not a very, I'm kind of an optimistic person overall. So I find it very easy to leave that behind, in a good way, I think. But yeah, so that's been a little bit more challenging to, how much do I share? Like, is it fair to, to remember that time publicly when I've, kind of so clearly moved past it? And I think this is something that we're much more cognizant of now. Like, there is no hierarchy to pain. Everybody's struggle when they're struggling is a valid struggle. So that part has actually been okay for me. I think it's a little bit more of like a survivor's guilt. Like, why me? Why not them? And then why me twice? And why not them still once? And like, I constantly have the kind of this, I'm sure you have this too, like this, rotating, like, catalog of names in my head of like this person and this person, and they're still waiting and they're still waiting. And, and even if I don't talk about it often, I really am constantly thinking about these people. So it's more of like that feeling. While at the same time, logically, I know that, everybody deserves it. And the fact that this happened to me and it didn't happen to them is nothing, is God's story to tell, and not a story that any of us will ever understand. So it's something I'm learning. And then part of it's just practical, that like, and this I have to remind myself, because I often feel bad, like, oh, I used to be able to write so easily, and I was able to, write better than I can write now. And then I just have to remind myself, well, I have a toddler and an infant. And, and for so many years I had just a kid who was pretty independent and would play by herself. And I had like physical time and I just don't have that. So I think it's kind of, I hope one day I'll be able to get back to that writing. Right. Or to writing more, I should say. Look,
the reality is that there was room in your day to be able to express in a way that you can't now. Like, even when she was in school or she was independent, right? Like, it's, What?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. What? Tell me, as we, close this out here, tell me, what do you say to people who are going through any kind of infertility or any kind of fertility struggles? How do you give them chizuk? How do you give them strength? What can you offer them in light of your own experiences? Because it lasted for a lot longer than you thought, and then here you are, thank God, in a very different position. So what do you say to people when they come to you?
I mean, I guess what I would say to people, I'm not like a big false hope person, but I just think that people need to know that there is hope. They're not big promises, but just to like do the next step, find the right doctor, find the next doctor, just take a step forward, I think, is the most important thing. I think people are often really paralyzed when it comes to infertility, and that taking that first step is so empowering, of just like, you're doing something, and then you never really know. I think looking, to myself, just sharing about my own story, I can, I love all these like Hallmark things, like, would you change anything about your story? And everybody always says, of course I wouldn't, because this is the story that you lived. But looking back, I can, and I was actually just talking to my husband about this the other day, I can see how I'm a much better parent to my toddler and infant now, that not that I would say I was a pretty good parent to my daughter then, but if I would have had, as I had wanted, immediately a second and a third and maybe a fourth, I think I would have been parenting from a very different place than I do now. I see that I parent from a place of a lot more calm, maybe more maturity. I mean, it is, 6 years later. My husband and I have built our relationship. I've had years to work. So, is that how I would have written my story to begin with? Probably not. Now that I look back at it, in retrospect, I clearly see the blessings in the way that our story panned out. So I think, being able to look at it from both perspectives, and then just to know that things really, it's a saying that, God's help can come in the blink of an eye, but we literally were doing the same thing for, I've lost count of the months, but it was, 2.5 years. So that's like, 30 months in a row, give or take one or two, where we had to take a break for whatever reason. And it just didn't work. And then 1 month it just did, And so I think, as long as there's reason to keep trying and to keep hoping, there's reason to expect or to hope and believe that that one day everything will change.
Beautiful message. And it's a hard message for people to internalize, right? Because we know the definition of insanity, right, is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. And when you've always had the same outcome, it's hard to still very much have that hope. And yet, here you are, right? Here you are.
Yeah. And it's not, I think it's a message that every person needs to only tell themselves. I don't think it's something that any of us has the right to tell anybody else. I think it's really important that we just be there to listen. If we're asked for our advice, then we can share advice. But otherwise, I think everybody's journey is for them to experience.
Absolutely.
In their own way.
Esty, thank you so much. Mazel tov. Mazel tov publicly on your children, on all of your children. You should just have a lot of nachas from them. And you are, it is an incredible honor to have you here, just to give exactly what you just said, to give people hope. We just don't know what the future holds. And I love the fact that there is hope that you've given for everyone here. So thank you so much. And one of these days,
probably more likely in New York than Kansas, but one day.
Okay. Thank you so much. And that was Esty Perman. Again, I want to say to everyone, we try very hard here at I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. We try very hard not to give people false hope, just exactly like Esty said. And we often don't share success stories with people, with all of you, because success, having a baby, is not the way we define success. Success is holding people in their pain and letting them know that they are always comforted, they are always held, we are always going to validate and support wherever they are. And so these stories that you're hearing tonight, they did have babies, they did get their miracles, but I want all of you to know not everyone gets a happy ending. I mean, Chavie Bruk, who's going to be coming on right now, Chavie's story is she and her husband have infertility, and they have never shared any more about their infertility, but they adopted 5 children. And Chavie built her family with these 5 children and told us all about the ins and outs of adoption, of all of the different stories, of the different challenges that she has. Some of her children she adopted when they were newborns. Some of her children she adopted when they were much older. Her daughter, Shoshana, she adopted as a teenager. And the different challenges, here she is. Here's Chavie.
Hello.
And she spoke about, I was just telling people your story, giving them a quick update. And you spoke about so beautifully both times. I mean, we're going to have to do a part 3 and a part 12. We're going to get there eventually.
It's always something to talk about.
But the challenges of adoption and the different pieces that you face. So first of all, hi. I haven't seen you in a while.
I know.
How are
been
you?
Too long. Thank God. Doing good. Yeah.
Okay. So
living life.
So correct. Life is full and rich and
crazy. And a lot.
Correct.
And,
correct.
All the things.
All the things. Okay. So your children are how old now? Give me the ranges.
Okay, so I was just thinking about, like, since the last time I spoke to you, and I think it was at least 2 years and on the podcast, and like, I have big kids, like, it's crazy. So Shoshana's 19, Chaya's 13, but like 14 in a couple weeks. Zisi's 12, almost 13, Menny's 10, and Hanaleya's 6.
Oh my goodness.
My baby is 6. It's very difficult.
Okay, I feel like I need to take a deep breath also, because I actually wasn't expecting that. Like
I know,
just said,
right?
I just said, I know you adopted Shoshana as a teenager, but like 19 for me seems like
she was 12.
Right.
So it's this month, it's going to be 7 years. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in like, the 15 minutes we have or less here, catch us up on your entire life, Chavie. Give us the highlights.
I was thinking, I'm like, how am I going to do this in 15 minutes?
Practically speaking, you have now been a mother of this brood of children, this multifaceted, layered, different needs, different, and these are your adopted children. Can you give us some of the highlights, and give us some of the challenges as they've gotten older, what you've been dealing with lately? Give us a little bit of that.
So, I mean, I think the highlights are, it's like every child, and as they grow older, and every experience that we have together just forces us to grow so much in communication, in attachment, in understanding, like, the brain and the subconscious, and like, I'm always fascinated, and the layers of the layers that you peel away, and the older you are, and the more, and the older your children get, and the more they experience, the more, like, you experience as a mom. Like, even just 2 years ago, like, I have so much more knowledge and so much more under my belt than I did 2 years ago, so, and a lot of significant things, happen in those times, like, as your kids get older. So some of those things, like, I was very open about the fact that my son, Manny, had to go to treatment for a few months. And that was a huge, huge challenge, and something that changed all of us, right, forever, and there's the trauma piece of that. And then there's the beauty and the attachment and growth and understanding that comes from that. So that has happened in the last few years. Shoshana graduated high school. She was also, in wilderness therapy, and that she had her journey. And then she came back home for 11th and 12th grade, which was amazing. And she graduated high school, and she's going into her sophomore year in college. And she's living in Bozeman, but in her own apartment. She's definitely on a very, very different journey than I would have ever imagined. And that takes a lot of, if I dare say, maturity and growth to just really work hard at accepting that this is not my story. This is not my life. I wish it would be a little different, but growing in our connection and attachment, while watching her do things that, don't align with your values. You know what I mean? Like, that takes a lot of, if I say, strength. It takes, and some days it feels like I'm not going to make it through, and together we do it. And it's, but what comes out of that is so beautiful. It's just so beautiful, but not without its pain, and not without its, ups and downs. And to get to the beautiful part, there's a lot of gritty, like, figuring it out, and trial and error, and, like, a lot of reckoning, personal reckoning. Like, why do we think the things that we think? Why do we do the things that we do? How do we support our children when they're not on the same path as we are? Like, that's a lot of self-reflection is needed to, like, navigate these challenges. And now I feel like I have, 3 teenagers. One is moving out of the teenager, kind of realm, and she's not living at home, but it's still a huge part of our lives. And then I have these 2, younger teenagers, and it's throwing me for a loop, like, just so much. Like, my daughter Zisi, I did speak about this as well, is, she has GLUT1, she has a genetic challenge, and it's a metabolic, and it's a lot of things, and I don't think a lot of people really pay attention to this, is that puberty is something that happens in our brain mostly. And so our brains we think a period, we think this, we think that, we think of the physical changes that happen to our body, but we don't necessarily realize that the brain is completely changing and realigning and growing and adapting to its new load. And so it takes so much energy. That's why a teenager, needs to sleep a lot, needs to eat a lot. They're like toddlers again, right? Because it takes so much energy for that brain to develop. Yep. And so when you have a daughter who has a condition that affects the energy of her brain, and she can't fuel her brain properly, so puberty is taking up every single ounce of energy that it has, and it leaves her with very little to function properly. Yeah. So we deal with that. It feels like we regressed quite a bit with behaviors and stuff like that, because but paying attention and understanding and asking the questions of why this is happening makes a huge difference, because now I understand. It's frustrating, and sometimes I get really depleted and angry, and then I have to remind myself like she's doing the best she can, right. And I know why. I know why this is happening. Right. So that's a little bit. And then my 6-year-old, she's turning 6 in 2 weeks. She's, I always joke, I'm like, I thought I saw it all. I thought by her, I saw it all. And she manages to make me feel like I have no idea how to be a parent. How do they do that? I mean, so she's doing great. She's amazing and feisty, and she's really, really, really teaching me a lot. Teaching me a lot. That's what they do. That's what they do. Okay, Chavie. So here's my question to you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Would you still do everything the same? Would you still absolutely adopt? Would you still absolutely knowing everything that you know? Do you still recommend adoption to people? And I'm going to throw in another question all boiled into this. And as they get older and start to ask more questions about where am I from? Who are my parents? And I know that you and I have discussed, and everybody should go back and listen to our other podcasts. Some of the adoptions you have open relationships with, some of them you don't. And so as you're getting older and as your children are getting older, what are the kinds of things that you're grappling with now as a parent? I think, so I'll try to make sure to answer all the questions, but I'll start with the first ones. Is, would I do everything the same? I don't know, I don't know. I think part of the reason why we make choices is because we make the choice with the knowledge that we have. And I think it's by design, right? Hashem kind of orchestrates your life journey and gives you the information that you need to make the choices that you end up making. So I don't know what I would do if I had all the knowledge that I have now. What would I do? I don't know. Can I say that, my family and the way that my family, was created, and I can't imagine it any other way. And I also really, really believe that Hashem put me in this world for this specific, journey. And my favorite thing that I teach a lot of Tanya, and the favorite thing that I came across recently is that the challenges that you go through and the your life's journey is the evolution of your soul. It's what your soul needs to reach its full potential. Wow. And just let that sink in for a minute. It's so powerful. My journey was meant to be this because my soul needed this friction and needed this specific journey to reach its full potential. And if I can reflect and be what kind of parent am I because of the circumstance that I'm in? What kind of person am I? I can 100% say I wouldn't be, the person I am today without the journey that I've been on. So is it hard? Sometimes I look at my life and I'm like, how the heck did I get here? How is this my life? What? In shock, right? Absolutely. And I still get a lot of, phone calls and questions about adoption. And I think the only thing that maybe shifted a little was just really, like, I don't think it's my job to tell every single person all the challenges and all the hardships of adoption. And, and I think because every journey is going to be, I don't know what it's going to look like for them. I don't know what the challenges are going to be for them. But I do think it is in my duty to make clear and help people recognize that raising adopted children is not a substitute for raising biological children. It's not like switch one to replace the other. And as a 23-year-old, like, I kind of thought that, like, no, I didn't know I didn't have anyone telling me differently. But through my journey, through a lot of therapeutic work, through, really understanding what I'm, what my life is and what I'm dealing with, made me understand that this is not like a substitute. This is like a different path, a fork in the road. And a lot of people go this way and I went this way. And so, yes, I thank God, like, I have a beautiful family and these are my children that were meant for me. Hashem designed that. Yep. But to think that it's going to be the same as a biological child, I feel like that does a disservice to the child and to you, if that makes sense.
I 1,000%. And I feel like I'm going to need, when we finish this conversation, I'm actually going to need to take a moment and listen again. Because
think about that, right?
Yeah,
the evolution of your soul. It's very powerful.
Very powerful.
And by the way, like I actually, like, sometimes if I'm present and grounded enough, like when I'm facing a really big challenge, I will stop and I will tell myself, like, this is the evolution of my soul. Like, it sounds like out there, but if you really think about it, like, it's quite comforting. It's quite comforting. Like, this is what my soul needs. Right. Like, this is what I need to reach my full potential. Hashem knows what I'm capable of. Hashem knows my power, and Hashem knows, like, this is what I need to be who I could be to the fullest.
Yeah, I'm just speechless because I need to sit with this for a while. And I'm saying to all of you, I think all of you should sit with this for a while. And what I can promise you is that, Chavie, you and I are going to be doing this again. We'll do it in the fall. We need to have a fuller, deeper conversation. Yeah. We have a lot to talk about. But I'm so grateful in your busy schedule that you were able to take time tonight.
I was honored to be here again. I've actually missed talking to you and to your wonderful audience. And I'm so honored to be part of this amazing, amazing community that you've created, that I think I said on Instagram earlier. Like, this is not about finding you the doctor or paying for your treatment. Like, this is about your soul, right? It's your soul. Like, how do we hold each other when we're going through, the evolution of our soul is not easy. It's painful. Right? And so how do we get supported through that journey? And this is what you do. And I stand behind it 100%.
Thank you. Thank you.
Love you all.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another surprise guest now. I have Lizzy Savetsky here, who was actually one of the first episodes on our podcast. And when we last spoke to Lizzy had her 2 children, her 2 daughters, but she also, at that point, had just been in the aftermath of having 2 ectopic pregnancies. Her life was threatened multiple times, and she wasn't really sure what the future would hold. But that was over 3 years ago, and now she's here now. Lizzy, how are you?
Wow, I can't believe it's been 3 years, Aimee. And first of all, I just have to say thank you, because you've been a huge part of my journey and my healing, and just reading your posts on Instagram, just knowing that you're a voice for all of us who have been through infertility and pregnancy loss. It's not something that I or anyone who's gone through it ever fully recovers from. And it's something that we do carry with us. And so I feel like you've been a part of my healing from the time you started up until today. So thank you for that. I cannot believe that we spoke 3 years ago. I remember very vividly sitting in my kitchen, and my parents happened to be there to see the kids, and my parents came on and made an appearance, and they were talking about their experience with their full-term stillbirth. And wow, yes, so much has happened since that time.
So much. And you know what? Actually, you're reminding me of something. Remember in one of those early conversations that you and I had, you spoke to me about how because you had opened up about your fertility struggles and because you were such a public figure, that people had started coming to you and asking you to hold space for them. So now, I mean, look, we're going to get to your life now in a second, but now we're X number of years later, we're 3 years later, and you've continued to do outreach and advocacy for people who are struggling to have families, to have children. How has that been for you? How do you manage all of that with all of the rest of the things that you do?
You know, I think that I always say it's a sorority that nobody wants to join, but I feel like I'm a part of this sisterhood and I want to be there to help anyone who's going through the things that I went through. I think there was a time where it was very dark for me because I was still very much in the middle of my Parsha, as I like to say, you know, knowing that I didn't feel like my family was complete yet. Being so public and having all these people come to me with their stories, it was hard for me because I wasn't on the other side. Now I come to realize that you're never really on the other side, but you know, you do get to a place where you make peace with things, God willing. And so now it is easier for me. It doesn't necessarily take me back to such a dark place. And I have to say, like, the thing that got me through all of the infertility, which I went through very privately in the beginning, nobody knew that I was struggling with infertility back in 2010 when I was not even my parents, but the things that got me through were the other people who had been through it that held my hand and walked me through it. That was the support I needed, was the support of people who can only understand this journey if they've been there. So if I can be that for somebody else on a public stage even, then, you know, for me, it's the only way that I can make peace with why what happened to me if I can be there for somebody else, if my challenges allow me to be a guiding light for somebody else.
That hits so deeply in my core, because look, that's the work that I do all day long here at I Was Supposed to Have a Baby. So we all know, I mean, many of us who know you and know your life currently, you have 3 children, but your pregnancy with your son, who's now, how old is he now?
He'll be 3 end of September.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Take us back a little bit to that time and to the pregnancy and how things are now.
So I went through, all of my children are IVF. I went through 3 rounds so I had done a second retrieval after my daughter Juliet, who was a frozen embryo, who's technically fraternal twins with Stella. I think we talked about this because they were the same. They were the same batch of IVF. So I didn't have any more embryos after that. So I did IVF retrieval again. I got 3 embryos. At that point, they were requiring in New York, I think they still do, everyone to genetic test the embryos because they thought it would increase the chances. Ironically, so Stella and Juliet were not genetically tested. And then ironically, I genetically tested these embryos that I got in the second batch. I only had 3 that were, you know, quality, that were good. And so, and I knew the genders, actually. They ask you if you want to know. I said, sure. So I knew that I had 1 boy and 2 girls. So I ended up losing all 3 of those pregnancies. All 3 IVF, you know, and it was just such a reminder that everything is in God's hands. You know, we have this amazing modern technology, modern science. You do everything you're supposed to do, and it's still in God's hands. So I had 2 ectopic pregnancies back to back, ended up having to get my tube taken out because it ruptured. And then I had a miscarriage, which is relatively early. it was traumatic for me because it was my third loss in a row. And, I had been so blessed with the girls that it worked the first time. So I just felt very defeated, and I felt like I had taken so much time away from my girls, invested in this infertility journey. And I was really just felt done. And so then we moved to Dallas, and I think that's around the time that I spoke to you on the podcast.
Yes.
And shortly after we got to Dallas for my husband's fellowship, he said, "We're in a new place now. I want you to just try one more time. This time, just do it for me." And I really didn't want to. I felt like I didn't have the strength, physically, emotionally, spiritually, to put myself through that again. But I agreed because I wanted to do it for my husband. And he knew that if he said that, he never asked me for anything. He knew if he said that. And I know now he was doing that for me. He knew that it would get me to agree to it. And he didn't want me to give up on my dream. And so I did IVF. I had to do another retrieval. And this time I said to the doctor in Dallas, I said, I will do it under two conditions. I said, first, I want to be on anti-anxiety medication because I had a lot of post-traumatic stress. I was having panic attacks. I was breaking out in hives randomly. And so I was worried about my emotional well-being. I was in therapy, but I wanted, the added help of the medication. And he said he would let me be on the medication until the transfer. I don't know. I think some doctors will let you stay on, but, and then I said my second condition was that I would only do it if it was a fresh cycle, meaning that I wanted to put the embryo in immediately and not test it, not freeze it, not wait, because I knew that the window of my willingness was very, very small. And once I had the hormones pumped through my body, could have very easily backed out. And he said that he would do it. He was like a very good Christian man. He's like, well, if this is how we're going to bring a laugh into the world, then all right, we'll do the fresh cycle for you. And he said because because I happened to be at the time 34 years old, and he said if you are under 35, the statistics are whether it's tested or not, it doesn't make a difference for under 35 audience of how of the success rate. And so he agreed. So we did it. It was and I had a positive pregnancy test. And I remember Ira left me to go to some conference in Florida. And I was like alone in Dallas, and I started freaking out. Like I just like I wanted to climb out of my body is the only way I can describe it. So anyway, I made him fly back home from the conference. I was like worried about my mental state. I was losing it. And then I broke out in a case of hives that was so severe that I started to get facial and head swelling. So I went to the fertility doctor, and I walked in, and they said, "What are you doing here? You need to go to the emergency room immediately." Because it was like a very dangerous situation. So I went to the ER, and I told the resident who was admitting me, I said, "Nobody knows this, but I'm pregnant," because my mom was going to be coming. And I said, "My mom doesn't know this, but I just got a positive pregnancy test. I'm very concerned about this baby." And he was also like a really sweet, good Christian, as they are in the South. And he held my hand. He said, "Would it be okay if we pray?" And it was so touching. Like we held hands and we prayed, and he said a prayer. I asked him not to mention Jesus, and he was very polite. He didn't. And we prayed for me and my health and the unborn baby. I got admitted, and they started, pumping me with all sorts of things to deal with like this emergent hive and a potential anaphylactic situation. They couldn't figure out what had happened, or, there was talk about whether I was having an allergy to the exogenous progesterone. Now, the top allergists that I've seen think it was just like a case of idiopathic hives, because I've continued to struggle with them, brought on by the stress of the situation.
Right.
So
I'm going to stop you just for a second. Idiopathic, I as a physician, I'm just going to say idiopathic means from unknown origin, like they can't figure out what the reason why is that these hives are coming.
Exactly. So there was no known cause. Yes, exactly. And so they, so I was in the hospital, and then I think my second day there, they came in and they told me that the HCG had gone down, and that it was not going to be a viable pregnancy. And my doctor came in and he was like, "I'm so sorry." He said, I want to just wait and see a few days. Like, if you're able to just like pass this on your own, like, we'll see. You'll continue to, when you get out of the hospital, you'll come back in for blood work. And, but he said it's not going to be a viable pregnancy. At the time, I did think it was the progesterone that was causing this reaction. And I was so horrendously uncomfortable. I told him he said, "You should keep doing the progesterone." I said, "I'm not touching that stuff. I'm not using that." Because I thought that was what was making me have this reaction. Right. And so he said, it's not viable anyway, so that's fine. And so I got out of the hospital. I went into my doctor to get the blood work. And at that point, the HCG level was just plateauing. And so I started to freak out that I was going to have another ectopic pregnancy, because it was too early to see on an ultrasound where the pregnancy was. But because the HCG was being so erratic, it was behaving in a way that it could have been ectopic. And at that point, all I was thinking was, I don't want another ectopic pregnancy. Like, I wasn't even thinking the idea that this could be a viable pregnancy was a possibility, because when you've been through everything we've been through, it's just, you can't believe. So, he was like, "We're going to watch the levels, and we'll see." So I continued to go back in for blood work. And then, I'll never forget, I went in for blood work on a Friday morning, and, I was out to lunch with a friend, and I got a call from the nurse, and she said, "The HCG has gone up." And I was like, "Oh God, that's bad, because that means it's probably ectopic. The pregnancy's growing." She said, but the doctor still says, but the doctor says that it's a 95% chance that this isn't viable. And we just want you to know that. And I was like, "Wait, you're telling me there's a 5% chance that this is viable?" Because I was told there was a 0% chance. I'm like, there's a chance? Like, I'm very confused. And she's like, "Yeah, it's a very, very small chance, but there's a chance." And I was like, "What?" I was just like bugging out. I couldn't believe that there was even like a chance at all. So that was like something for me. And I started to actually like cling on to hope for the first time. And I went home that night and I lit an extra candle on, it was when I lit the candles for Shabbat. And I've never, it was like such a otherworldly experience. I was like, "God, I don't know what's going to happen with this pregnancy, but if you're telling me that there's any chance, I'm asking you to like give this to me. Like, I'm begging." And I had said desperate prayers before. This wasn't the first time. And so, but I did believe that if there was a chance that it could happen, and I wanted to be positive. And the worst thing that could happen was I was going to have another ectopic, which I had dealt with before. But there was this great possibility. So, and then we went back the following week. Ira's here with me. Ira, it was like the following week we went back in
to get the HCG check.
Yeah.
few days later.
Oh, it was a few days later, and it, and the HCG had gone up again, and my doctor said this could be a blighted ovum. It could, like, he was like, I don't want you to get excited. And then a couple days after that, we went in, and I remember I woke up that morning and I was extremely sick. I was vomiting like all morning. But I don't know. I was like projectile vomiting. I had to like bring a bag in the car. And we got there, and there was a heartbeat in my, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I know how this story ends, and I'm still like, I chills.
Yeah, it was really one of the most insane experiences. You know, and even throughout the pregnancy, we were holding our breath every step of the way. Like, is this baby going to be normal? You know, like I had like tons of steroids pumped into me, and like, you know, the whole, and then of course, like, so throughout the pregnancy, Ira and I are both nervous wrecks. And then at the end, Ollie, my son, was very, very small throughout the entire pregnancy. He was measuring under, and at the end, they were very concerned about his size, and he was IUGR, intrauterine growth restriction, and there was this question of whether or not they were going to induce me. And then at exactly 37 weeks, my water broke, and it was all this clotted blood. I was like hemorrhaging, and I was freaking out. I didn't know what was going on. And I drove myself to the hospital because I was like, I didn't know what, I was like in that desperate, you know, as a mother, like the things you do, you're not thinking clearly. I just jumped in the car. My housekeeper like threw a towel at me, and I sat on the towel, and I got to the hospital, and I literally left my car in the parking garage with the doors open, running. And I sat down in some wheelchair that some woman who had just had a baby was getting out of. And I told them I was like, I'm bleeding everywhere. I don't know what's happening. And the woman who was pushing the wheelchair said, I've seen some babies like this make it before. I was like, thank you. But I remember like being at the light about to turn into the hospital. And I was like, God, if you really brought me all the way here to just take this baby from me, like I'm never going to be able to move. Like I just couldn't imagine. And I had no idea what was happening. I had never heard of placenta abruption before, but that's what was happening. My placenta had detached from my uterus. And so they hooked me up to the monitor straight away, and I heard the heartbeat, and I was so relieved. But they told me that I needed to get the baby out like immediately. I thought that they would do an emergency C-section, but they said I could push. They were not going to let me wait for a contraction. I guess I was progressed enough that I could push the baby out. And they said, we're so sorry, but we're not going to be able to wait for your husband. It was COVID time. So I was by myself. I said, that's okay. Just get the baby out. It's fine. And literally as I start pushing, Ira walks in the door, and I pushed one time. It wasn't a contraction, and Ollie just like flew out. It was the most insane situation. And I remember he was like this tiny, like ugly purple creature, tiny. And I just like, I loved him so much. And I just couldn't believe that he was crying, and that he was there, and that he came out. And like, it had been such an emotional roller coaster from start to finish, like so much drama. And then to just have this baby, you know, like not even 5 pounds. And, you know, he ended up having to be in the NICU for a couple of weeks, but he was by all intents, you know, by all standards, but relative, you know, pretty much healthy. So I was very, very blessed. So it was a very tumultuous journey to get to the family of 5.
Oh my goodness, Lizzy. You know, people always say, right? They're like, oh, everything you see on social media is just the highlight reel. You don't
Yeah.
actually know what goes on in people's lives. And you gave all of us, I mean, I knew a little bit before other people when you went public. I knew you were pregnant beforehand, but
Right.
you gave the rest of the world glimpses into this. We knew this pregnancy was a threatened one. We knew you were sick and having this allergic reaction. But I mean, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. You've been so generous with your time. As we close out here, what do you say to the people who are still not where they want to be? Maybe they don't have kids yet. I'm a big believer in the yet, right? Like I like to have hope, even though we know that, sometimes it's not going to end in a positive ending. You're not going to get that happy ending, but I'm a big believer in hope. What do you say to all of those people who are still waiting and hoping for their yets?
I only got through all of this because of my faith. And I tell people who are in the yet area that being angry with God is a manifestation of faith because you believe in God. And that's why you're able to be angry with him. And I think it's one of those really hard things to digest, that we have so little control. We can only do the limited things that we can do. And the rest is really in God's hands. And I think there's comfort in knowing that like God is running the show here. And, I would say to just hang on to hope. And for me, like doing physical things, that were manifestations of my faith really did help. Like whether it was going to the mikveh or lighting that extra candle or baking challah, like doing an action really did help me to feel like I was doing something, because I think a lot of this journey feels very helpless and feels very passive. The other thing I will say is, so the first thing is faith, hold on to hope. And if you can take an action that feels authentic to you, then do it. And then the other thing I'll say is, you have to be your own advocate. Like I had times where I was and times when I wasn't. But nobody's going to advocate for you like you will for yourself. I think a lot of times, like these doctors in the fertility world, they're not psychologists or psychiatrists. They know how to do what they know how to do. And so you need to find the right support that they probably can't offer you, whether it's whether you need medication or therapy or whatever it is. There is so much amazing support out there. And also leaning on people who've been through it, because that's what's going to get you through this. Because a lot of times you will feel like you are isolated and alone and like you're the only person who's ever gone through this, but you're not. And so having the sisterhood is so important. So connection with others, connection with God, that's what's gonna get you through this.
Amazing. Thank you. There's so much to learn from. I feel like I need to even listen to this again just to glean some pieces in my own life. But thank you. Thank you for giving us the update, and may you only have nachas from your children and continue to just be a light and an inspiration for people. People really look up to you because you have been so public about your story, and is it a tremendous source of comfort for so many. So thank you. On behalf of everyone. Thank you. Okay. I have another surprise guest. It's not such a surprise, but I have Adelle here from One World Awareness. We last spoke to Adelle about 2 years ago, and she opened up all about her primary infertility journey and why she decided to open up her Instagram account, why she decided to go public. And so we just want an update on how you are and how, like, my questions for you are, now that you have been public and you've been public not for a short amount of time, how do you regret going public? How do you feel that people look at you now? The reality is, I mean, people who may know you or not know you, you don't have any children yet. I'm a big believer in the yet. So you're still in that place of dealing with primary infertility, but people know. So I'm curious if you can give us an update on your reflections as to like going public and how that's been for you.
So definitely no regrets. It's really nice how like I'll go to a wedding like here in California or New York, and I'll find someone, they'll come to me and they'll say they follow me, or I see someone that I don't even know, and I know that they do send in funds for my packages, and it like there's a connection there that I don't even know. Like I don't know them personally, but through these connections on my Instagram, we've created that bond. And I just like have this need to hug them, and it's like it's really nice how I created that kind of relationship through my account to feel that support for me and for everyone else that I'm advocating for. And it, there's like really high benefits to what I did, and I don't have any regrets.
Amazing. Amazing. Wait, you mentioned the packages. So that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. You know, many people, and I can speak for myself, you know, many people take their fertility struggles, and actually, I'm going to take that back completely. Not many people. Some people are able to take their fertility struggles and channel it into some sort of direction, some sort of project where they take their pain and they're able to give back to everyone else, whether it's just by simply sharing stories, or whether it's, you know, I started this organization, I was supposed to have a baby. You started this program with these packages that you send to people who are going through infertility. And that's what you were mentioning before. Like people sometimes come up to you and they reference the packages. So I'd love, that was something that I think maybe you were thinking about, but you weren't doing the last time we spoke. So can you tell us all about that? How you got the idea, how you put it all together, who participates, where does it go to? Just give us a little bit of a window into that project.
So I think in the beginning of our journey, it was very, closed doors. Not a lot of people knew about it, especially in the beginning. People don't really know what's going on. But after a few years, either of us just speaking about it, or, close people. No, actually, it's not even that they assumed. It's more that people that we shared about, or specifically when I started sharing on my Instagram, we would get packages, not so many, but enough that it created such an impact that I was like, wow, these are, coming and seeing a package at the door, opening up the door and seeing a package. It's really touching and it's meaningful. And, if we're sharing chocolates together on Shabbos, or having flowers at the table from someone, and seeing it day after day, or, taking a bite, and it sticks with you. It doesn't heal like I'm completely, obviously, but it just eases it. So it kind of inspired me, because I think a lot of people just don't have that awareness of what it could do. So I was like, the first one I did was on Mother's Day. I thought it's just a hard day, obviously. And I was like, okay, I want to send a box of chocolates. I didn't know it was going to go as many times as it is now. So I sent a box of chocolates. And from there, I was like, okay, there's other moments in the year that are hard as well. So, and I saw how many people were eager to support me in doing this. So I was like, okay, let's keep going. So started off with Hanukkah as well. That was the second initiative I did, was Hanukkah. We did 8 days of gifts, and everyone got a gift. And then like the next year after that was not only like a raffle, but everyone was guaranteed a box in the mail. And then it went on to Rosh Hashanah, which I personally feel like it's a very trigger time for me, because it's like, okay, here we start the year again. Like I thought this year would be the year, and it's like, okay, yeah, it just like brings up so many emotions of grief and needing to like, okay, I have to daven again, and I davened last year, and I manifested it, I imagined it, and it's not, I'm not carrying a baby in my arms, and it's just like, how can I come to that point of again of asking? So I sent like honey inspired gifts themed. I also I do have a creative side to me. So within like, I do like helping people, and I also like tapping into creativity. So yes, I'm giving back, but also like what you said about, it helps my pain of just delving in, distractions, brainstorming, and
beautiful. Okay. And how does, I guess, two questions. How does someone get onto this list to get a package? And then number two is, how does, where are you getting the funding to do this? Who's giving you the products? How is that piece organized? Do you package all the products yourself? Do you have other people helping you? Give us a little window into just, the mechanics of how all this works.
So sometimes I do find businesses that, like, let's say for Shalach Manas, I saw like a ready-made. It also depends on me and where I am in my life. Sometimes I'm like, with this journey, it's like there's pockets of time where you're just, I don't have time and to just like go in it completely. But there's some times where I do it myself. And I realized that also, like in the beginning, I was like, I just want to do this myself. But so there's an extra touch when I do it. But then I was like, realistically, there's times where it's just like not very doable and it's unfair to me. And I feel like through this journey, I also found that like it's very important to create those boundaries, like of knowing if there's those pockets of time that it's really, it just drains all of you. Like you just can't add other stress and just about self-care and all that. So I'm mindful of that. Then for signups, I do like a Google Doc, and I have like a questionnaire of different things, and they sign up. And then people who want to sponsor, like that's why it's like kind of one world, because there's the people that are going through it, the people that are not going through it. So it's really nice. So I have two links separate for the people that are going through it and want to sign up, and the people that want to give. And lately it's just like it's really, really nice. And I'm so appreciative of all those that are just, I don't even have to ask, like they're just send me the link, like they're so consistent on it. And it's really touching to know that like I have that back end of support.
That is absolutely incredible. I mean, you really have created one world exactly in the name of your Instagram handle. You absolutely have done it. Adelle, to leave off, is there a piece of advice or something that has helped you in the last couple of years, something that you hold on to as something that helps you and that you could give to others, you could share with others as they're going through their fertility journeys?
In the beginning, it felt scary to continue getting into these like holes of like, okay, how are we going to bounce back? How are we going to, go to a different route? Like, it's just like this stuff, like how we're always figuring out different ways to get to our goal. And I feel like every time we kind of got into that time of like a failure or just bad tests or just a doctor telling us to just stop trying and all of those things, there was always like a doubt of me of like, are we going to recover from this? Are we going to like fear of what's going to happen? And now, like, since it's happened, like these times have happened so many times, and I see how we could recover with time and we could heal. So now when it does come, it's like, okay, yes, this is uncomfortable. It hurts. I'm in pain, but it's like, I know if through time, I'm going to come back and feel stronger, and time does a lot, and just giving that space and patience. Like, just don't get scared about like, oh my gosh, this like what's going to happen. Like, don't let the anxiety really make you feel like this is like, we're not going to get through this. You will get through it. It takes time, patience, and just doing nice things for yourselves together, individually, therapy, all of that. You'll come back to a stronger place, and you'll have enough strength to try something else, try it again. So yeah, that's
beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, we now have another wonderful surprise guest. So I have Aimee Seroussi. Aimee and I last spoke around Hanukkah time, where she, for the first time, shared her journey of primary infertility. Aimee, tell me, you have been married for how many years? Remind me.
Going on 13.
13 years. And as of this moment, and I'm going to say the word yet because, and I've said this in a number of different interviews already, you don't have children yet. That is still the case, correct?
That is right.
And yet, and we're going to hold on to the yet, but the piece that I want to talk to you about now is it's been 9 months-ish since the last time we spoke. And that was the first time that you ever spoke about this in a more public way. How has it been for you? What kind of reaction did you get? How do you think people are treating you any differently? Do you find that you're able to go through whatever you're going through a little bit differently because you now know that more people know? I'm curious how the last 9 months have been for you.
Well, first of all, one of the amazing things that happened was that people reached out to me that I knew growing up, that I knew in high school. And that was totally unexpected. And it was so nice to hear from people. And I was so touched by the way that people, not having been in touch for 10 plus years, would just reach out, send a WhatsApp, send an email saying, I heard you, I really connected to what you said. It was so validating for me. Like, part of what was holding me back was how are people going to hear this? You go out and you project this image of everything is fine. And, people may know that you don't have kids, but it's very closed off. So I was nervous sharing. And it was such a relief to hear from people, to hear that it touched them, that they took away something from it, that they connected. So that was very, very validating, and empowering, to help me continue, to say what I have to say and to share what I've learned. With my family, it's been interesting. My mom, on the one hand, she's so proud of the fact that I did this. She sends the link to everyone, but we never actually spoke about the contents. It's hard, for a mother to hear her daughter speak in a way that's so raw, and, to go back to things that were so painful. There were other people in my family that I chose not to mention it to, because I didn't want them to be hurt. I didn't want them to hurt hearing, about experiences in which I was hurt. But on the whole, I think it was very liberating in a way. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I was able to take something that at certain times has been so negative and so painful, and turn it into something that for me is about growth, and is about sharing, is about, helping others, empowering others. So I'm very, very happy that I shared, and yeah.
I think often about our conversation, and I realize, I think that I mispronounced your last name. It's Seroussi, right?
Seroussi, right?
Seroussi, right? Okay, I apologize. It's been 9 months since we've spoken, and I forgot, so I apologize.
No, not the first.
I think often about how you gave over not this toxic positivity, but you gave over light and hope in a way that was real and tangible without being saccharine-esque, honestly. And I'm wondering, in the last 9 months, ish, since we've spoken, how has that been? How have you been? How has your journey been? Has that attitude, the way that you've approached this, is it the same? Do you find yourself in the same place emotionally with this, a similar attitude? Have things shifted for you in any way, either more positive or more negative? I mean, obviously we know this journey has so many ups and downs. And, if you would ask a person on one day, I'm sure the answer would be, don't talk to me. And the next day it would be, I'm fine today, because that's the nature of all emotions, difficult emotions often, that we often can't sit in the depths of that emotion for a long time. But how can you give us an update? How have the last number of months been for you?
So it's interesting. I once I heard something by a woman who was talking about she had like repeated pregnancy loss, and I think she went through a span of like 7 miscarriages within 4, something crazy, within a very short period of time. And she had this line that really stuck with me. And she said, at first she was just pushing through, and another one and another one and another one. She said, by the end of that period, I didn't want anything anymore, not even a baby. And wow. That was a very, very, that was a very powerful line for me to hear. But I think that at some point, that's something that we struggle with. Like, I think that you have these, like, this ebb and this flow of like, oh my gosh, like I have to keep going. I want this so badly. And then when you get hurt, like when you put your hand close to a flame and then you get burned, you like recoil. So I think that there's sort of this constant up and down of like, I want it, I don't want it, I want it, I don't want it. Specifically for people who don't yet have children, you don't really know what you're missing. In the sense, you do in a way, right? You're not living in a cave, you see people around you, but at some point, you say, okay, like I want to. You take a break, and then you get used to being on a break and not doing a treatment. And it's so hard. You don't want to go back to that place. So I think that the past 13 years in some sense has been this up and this down of like, being in a different phase of I want it so badly, I don't want it. Hopefully it's sort of like a spiral where as time goes by, every time I get to a different stage, I'm sort of at a different level, experiencing it a little bit differently. But I think that's where I am.
And is your husband also in a similar place? Does he, I know you spoke about him and your relationship, and sometimes he's in one place, you're in a different place, but the two of you always come together, obviously. How I'm curious how he felt about your story being public, and also how the last 9 months have been for him as well.
So he was very supportive. I think he's sort of not surprised the direction that I took this. And I remember like pretty much from the beginning, I would tell him, we started to do treatments and it was hard and it wasn't working and I was frustrated and there were tears and there was, and at some point I started to tell him, I don't just want a baby at this point. It's not enough just a baby. I need to get something else out of this journey. I want, wisdom. I want something else, obviously I want the baby, but I want more than that. So I think this was sort of him watching me from the side. He sort of sees this as like the natural progression of things, where as time went on and I sort of was able to figure things out a little bit more and sort of carve out this journey, and then at some point own the journey, which I'm very hesitant to say that because we never know what's around the corner, but hopefully good things, right? Exactly. But I think that, many men, my husband specifically, I don't know, I don't want to use the word shallow, but I think that they're sort of simpler when it, comes to their emotions. And I think, want kids, like that's kind of that's where he's holding. I think that we're sort of in this place of I feel like we've like had every conversation that we can have from every different angle about this. So then sometimes when, I bring it up, like sometimes I think sometimes we sort of ask ourselves the question, do we want to bring it up now? Is it a good time? Like, is it going to put a damper on whatever we're doing? Do we want to, but I think that's coming from a good place of like being really, really comfortable knowing where the other person is holding and knowing, I think at this point we've really spoken about all of the different scenarios and how, we want to deal with them.
Look, it's the classic interplay between two people, right? And two people needing two different things, but also feeding off each other. I think it's absolutely incredible. Okay, Aimee, to close here, I know you said that there was a story that you wanted to share that you thought that would be inspirational or hopeful for people in this community. I'd love it if you could give that over to us now.
Sure. So this is a story that happened actually last summer. But when you contacted me about doing this short interview, it was really something that I thought about, because I think that this is sort of like, you're talking about where I'm holding. This is, I guess this sort of sums it up for me. So this happened last summer, almost exactly a year ago. And basically I decided that I have a nephew who just so happens he is the nephew that was born right at the start of our fertility journey.
Wow.
Yeah, we actually mentioned his mother, my sister-in-law, the last time that we spoke, where she was a very close friend. And then we ended up marrying two brothers within a very short time, a week apart. And then exactly. So this is my oldest nephew, and he's 12 now. And he's about to be 12, and he's sort of going through a tough time, a little bit in school, a little bit at home, and he sort of needed some extra attention. So it just so happened that I had a few days off from work, and I said, you know what, I'm going to be a good aunt, and I'm going to invite him over, and I have some time, and we'll go out, and I'll take him around town, and we'll have fun. So that was the plan. And God has a very interesting way of arranging things, because it just so happened that he was with me for 3 days. And on the second day, it was a pregnancy test for an IVF cycle that I had just done.
Wow.
So I was debating, do I cancel? Do I not cancel? I said, all right, you know what, let's just do it. And it was a very big IVF. It was a very big IVF moment for us, because we had really just been in this for so long and nothing seemed to be working. And we sort of had the sense that, like, if this doesn't work, then we really need to reassess what we're doing, maybe switch doctors, maybe just do something different. So the second day, I wake up early in the morning, he's still sleeping, and I go for a blood test. And later that day, I get a text message, and it's negative. Yeah. So we're about to go in. I had taken him to Ammunition Hill in Jerusalem, which is the site of, the battle for Jerusalem during the 6-Day War. They have this beautiful museum, and you can climb on the tanks, and it's really interesting for kids. So we had just gotten in, I just paid for the tickets, and the first step, you go into this sort of movie theater and you see this movie, and I'm like, sort of the lights are dimming, and I'm sort of left to just sort of absorb and process and figure out how I'm going to put a smile on as soon as I come out of here in 10 minutes and just get through the next 2 days. So we're watching this movie, and the movie, I highly recommend for anyone who's never been. It sort of takes you back to, the days leading up to the war. So you see the panic and the anxiety of the people. You have this like very, very new, fresh state right after the Holocaust. And there's this real fear that after just a couple of years, it's going to be wiped off the map. When you go and so you see footage of the preparations and the soldiers, and everyone's getting ready for this war, and people are understanding that it's inevitable. And then you see, people are sitting in bomb shelters, and soldiers are parting from their families, and they don't know if they're going to see them again. And it's just very, very intense, all of this footage. So I was, taking this all in, and you see at some point, you see that, the first shots ring out and the war basically starts. And then all of a sudden, unexpectedly, you have all of these victories. So there's footage of this, one of the commanders who's sitting on Ammunition Hill, which is where we were. And he radios into the central command and he says, we've gotten this far. I'm going to keep pushing through and we're going to get to the old city. We're going to recapture the old city. And he says, and it, you can just feel that like the atmosphere is charged. And he says, for the first time, we're going to recapture the old city. And for the first time in 2000 years, Jerusalem and the Kotel, it's going to be in Jewish hands. So at this point, I'm thinking, I remembered that the Talmud actually lists 10 barren women. 10 barren Jewish women. And the first one obviously is Sarah Imenu. And the last one is Zion, which is Jerusalem. And the idea is that the Jerusalem sort of lost her children when the Jewish people went into exile after the destruction of the Second Temple. And she'll get them back when the Messiah comes, when Mashiach comes. And I just identified this with this so strongly, like, oh my God, like, I can feel what she's feeling. So going back, you have the war and they're pushing through and they get step by step, they get to the old city walls and they breach the walls and they're just so in disbelief that this is actually happening. And they finally get to the Kotel and they win and that's it. And it's over. Right. And the war is, the battle for Jerusalem is over and they have the Kotel in this hands, and you see like real footage of these soldiers. They're touching the stones and they're praying and they're crying. And then you have the commander who like raises the Israeli flag, and you see the chief rabbi of the IDF, Rabbi Shlomo Goren. He comes and this iconic picture of him blowing the shofar. And at this point, I'm like a complete wreck, like bawling. And obviously, I'm crying because the movie is so powerful. But
of course, you're crying. You're crying for you also.
Exactly. So the lights go on and, it's a little bit awkward, all of these like parents with their camp kids and like, I'm like sitting there, look, complete wreck. But I was really, really comforted because I felt like I'm part of something bigger than me. At that moment in time, I was so confused and frustrated and angry and hurt and, just so many question marks about what the future is going to look like. But I understood in that moment that like, I'm part of something. I'm part of something bigger than me, and I get to be part of something bigger than me. I don't think that they're exactly the same thing. And if I lean into that, then really amazing things can happen. And just getting to be part of this epic story is, it's a privilege in some sense. And thinking back to the story, in both of our families, my grandparents are survivors of Auschwitz. My husband's family, they were exiled during the Spanish Inquisition. They still to this day have certain customs that they do on Pesach, on Passover, to remember, the Inquisition, that they were secret Jews. And it sort of just tied it all together for me, that I specifically sitting with my nephew who sort of opens up this chapter of my life in Jerusalem, watching this movie and being sort of, in a sense, one of these barren women, that was very, very powerful for me. So again, like you said at the beginning, hopefully we're going to have, there's going to be a very happy ending to the story. But in that moment, I felt like a very, very strong sense of comfort. And I wanted to share that with your community. Hopefully, something of that will resonate.
Oh, Aimee, I feel that very deeply in my neshama, in my soul right now, this incredibly powerful idea. I mean, we just went through Tisha B'Av a few weeks ago, not even a few weeks ago, a week and a half ago. And this idea that Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, is crying for her children is a very powerful one. The imagery of that day, the things that we read, it's a very powerful thing to think about. And your words right now are really driving all of that home. I think for all of us, may all of us, both in our own lives and in the grand scheme of things, the Jewish community at large, may we all be able to see the beauty and be able to feel a sense of coming home and that hope and seeing Mashiach very, very soon. Thank you so much for that gift, for that story, and for sharing of yourself way back then and also now. We all wish you just only goodness and only things yet to come. May it come soon.
Thank you, Aimee, and thank you for giving all of the women like myself the platform to speak and also, on the other end to observe and to soak in. I've been on the other end for so long, and I know how valuable that is.
Thank you. I am thrilled now to bring you another guest. This is Malki Rodal. Oh, Malki, we haven't spoken in so long. I don't even know if I pronounced your last name right. Did I pronounce it right? Okay. Okay. Phew. So, Malki, the last time you and I spoke, it was at a point where you had just given birth to your triplets. Mm-hmm. But two of them didn't make it. And you had Aimee, who was delicious and yummy, and who was, I think, a few months old, 3, 6, something like that. And we spoke about your journey of loss, of how you had these babies, and then they weren't part of your life anymore in this world, but they were still very much sitting on you, and you were carrying them with you as you raised your child and raised your other children, that they mm-hmm. were still very much a part of your life. It is now a number of years later. Can you give us an update as to where you have been? Where has your life taken you since then?
Okay. It's crazy that it's been a couple of years. Like, it feels like it was yesterday. But at the same time, it feels like a lifetime ago. There was so last time we spoke, we had just moved to Newcastle, which is like a regional area in Australia. We had a new shlichus position where we had opened a Chabad house, reaching out to Jews in this area, and our surviving triplet was thriving. And there was a very delicate, cautious sense of relief. Like, we had this crazy story of loss, but we've come out the other side. We're good. We're okay. That was a chapter that we are now closing. As probably everyone remembers, 2020 was a time of COVID, and, we had our own struggles here in Australia with lockdowns and everything. But I think Aimee was almost 2. And we found out we were expecting. And it was a whole crazy story because of the lockdowns. I was locked out of mikvahs because there was nowhere. I feel like I'm touching on things that need to be explained, but essentially it was complicated. It was complicated to find a mikvah. And it was a whole long story. And that month, I got pregnant. And I felt like it was such a warm hug from God saying, I see the struggles that you went through. I see the day-to-day challenges, and here's a gift. And obviously there was a certain amount of cautious anxiety because of our previous losses. But the whole time I told myself, this isn't the same kind of pregnancy. That was a fluke. That was, it was a complicated triplet drama. This is just a straightforward garden variety pregnancy. Everything's going to be fine. Except that it wasn't. When I was 22 weeks pregnant, on a Friday night, I had a moment of quiet. I gone to put Aimee down. He was 2.5, I guess. Put him to sleep before all our guests arrived. And I was sitting in the quiet room and realized that I hadn't felt the baby move in a while. He'd probably been moving for a few weeks already. And my initial, I remember so clearly that feeling of my heart dropping into my gut. And all my brain space of, it's fine, it's just the anxiety, this is a different pregnancy. It wouldn't push it away. Except that I had a massive room full of Shabbos guests arriving. So we didn't really have time for that. So I sort of pushed it to the side, hoping that it was just because I was tired or just because whatever. But I've learned now that the mother's intuition knows, like that gut feeling when you're a woman, you know what's going on. And we ended up going into, it's a very long story and we can tell it another time, but we ended up going in to have a checkup, assuming that it'd just be another, false alarm and it'd be fine and they'd send us home. And they couldn't find a heartbeat. And the baby was very dead. Like there was nothing they could do. The baby was gone. And that started a whole new chapter because we were now in that category of recurring loss. For me, it was it wasn't like, oh, I've done this before, I know what I'm doing, because it was a completely different situation. We lived far from family and friends. We were on our own. And also there was no baby to take home. With the triplets, we lost babies and we took home a baby. Here, it was just that silence that I'm sure people can relate to. Because we live in a, isolated area, we are the Chevra Kadisha. Like, people talk about metaphorically taking home your baby in a box. Like, I had to go down to the hospital and pick up this styrofoam box. And, right? Like, you just think, what? Why is this, not why is this my life? Because the whys don't help, but just what is going on? And after that, there was that, it was really hard after that. Because here were two instances of random, in quotation marks, loss. So the triplets was a crazy story. And after that, I was like, okay, that was it. Chapter closed. But the next pregnancy, again, ending in loss for a completely different reason, a completely random reason. I just felt like I have no control. Like, I have no idea what's going on. If we fast forward a whole lot through a whole lot of grief and struggles and tears, now we have a delicious, gorgeous baby who's 3 months old. He is just a light in our lives. But pregnancy after loss, and especially after losses, plural, is excruciating. And I know that for people who are yearning to get pregnant, probably hearing that feels like I'm being selfish, like at least you can get pregnant. But first of all, there's no at least. We know that from I was supposed to have a baby, right? Aimee tells us all the time, there's no at least. There's no pain Olympics. But also, yeah, I hated every day of that pregnancy because I was so scared. And, I feel like when you say anxiety, it's more about things that won't happen, but you're still worried almost. I was sure that we wouldn't get to having a baby because why would we? Like, history had shown that it continues to repeat itself. And it was a really, really long pregnancy. Even till the day that he was born, I couldn't fully open my heart to accept that we were having a baby until he was alive and crying in my arms, which is really sad as a mother to almost not trust that process that is so natural. But that's where we are. And thank God this time we made it to the finish line.
I know your story because of the pieces that you have shared on your social media, on your platform. And yet, like, I'm sitting here and just listening, and everything that you're saying is bringing back all of my pregnancy after loss stuff.
Right.
Exactly what you just said, that you didn't believe that he was going to be alive until the moment he came out of your body. I will tell you that, so many of you know out there in the I was supposed to have a baby community, you know that my last pregnancy was a twin pregnancy. And I was scheduled for a C-section because they were both breech. And the morning of our C-section, I had 3 other children at the time. I put my children on the bus, and I didn't tell them a word about how I was going to the hospital to have these babies. I kept I did not believe at all that I was going to come home with one, let alone 2, with one that was going to be alive. I did not believe it until the moment they took those babies out and they put them on my chest. Yes. Yes. Here is I have 2 other questions for you before we finish today with this just very short recap.
Yeah.
One is, you've been public about your story for a very long time, Do you have any regrets, or do you think that it helped you? Do you think that now, do you have people coming to you via either social media or in your real life, especially also with that 20-week loss, that 22-week loss of that baby, where I mean, at that point, you didn't have a choice, right? Everybody knew you were pregnant, and then everybody knew you were not pregnant, but you already had a story of loss. Was it helpful for you? Is it helpful for you? How do you feel about it now?
I think that right from the beginning, my intention was always to be able to tell my story in my words. With our first loss, we still lived in a beautiful insular Jewish community where everyone knows each other's business, which is a beautiful thing, and also can be hard when you're going through something that you might want to keep private. And originally, I wanted to be able to tell our story in our own words. But very quickly, I realized how cathartic it was, how therapeutic it was for me to put my chaos that was in my brain and that like mush of just that tangle of emotions into words. And like putting it into words helped me understand myself. And I probably could have just left it at that as writing in my journal, but that's the second thing that you touched on. People felt seen in my words, people who had never said to anyone, never talked about their losses with anyone, reached out and said, "You're describing my story. You're touching on these emotions that I haven't thought about for years." These are people who are grandmothers who hadn't given enough of their time to these emotions for whatever reason, and all of a sudden had words that I had written that they related to. So that definitely gave me an extra push to share what I was writing. But I know that when I read other people's words, so many of the things that you share on your platform are so, I don't know what the word is. Like it's more than important. It feels like your soul is being seen, and it's not necessarily something that we talk about, face to face all the time, either because it's taboo or because it's too hard. And having someone normalize it. Having someone say, that's not crazy what you're thinking, that is totally normal, is life-changing. So I don't regret it. And I will continue to share, hopefully, good things. And it is vulnerable at times. I think mostly for the people who know me, when I, share something really heavy, and then my friends or my family will reach out and be like, are you okay? That makes me feel most vulnerable. But it's an honor to stand in this community.
And we all stand here and wish we didn't have to stand here, right? Like this is the worst place. We would never wish this upon anyone, and yet here we are. Right. Malki, last question before we finish today. For all the people out there who are going through loss, who are in the depths of their pain, who are thinking about trying again, who may have had one loss or multiple losses, what can you give them as a way of offering them? I'm not going to say hope, because I feel like we can't predict the future. We don't know if the next pregnancy is going to be a good one. So hope is not the right word, but I think, what can you give them in terms of the way you coped with getting through that? I would say that this pregnancy with your delicious 3-month-old Yehuda, how did you, besides, the not believing it until the moment he was born, how did you get through 9 months?
Yeah. In short, I didn't. I think number one is, don't judge yourself for having a hard time. Don't judge those negative emotions or that questioning, because it's normal that you're so scared and it's so hard. But I think the main thing is to find the tools that work for you. For me, it was about knowledge. I asked the doctors a million questions because I knew that nobody can predict anything, but for what they could tell me, for the things that I could do, I wanted to know everything. And not every doctor, not every nurse was as gentle as they could be. So I moved on to the next one. I wanted to be able to ask at every single appointment, how many times a day should I feel the baby kicking? And what should I do to make sure that I'm healthy? Even though there are no answers, just having that someone to answer your questions. And I think the same thing in a spiritual sense, finding what talks to you. Because for everyone, it's different. And the worst thing is when somebody else puts that on your plate, like, oh, you really should pray more, or you really just got to believe, like, you do not need that. But for yourself, find ever, regardless of what you're going through. But find, be curious. Find something that talks to you in the spiritual realm, because pregnancy sort of fits so much more into the spiritual realm than the physical, in terms of there's nothing material that you can hold on to, really, right? There's no for sures. It's not like if you follow the script, then it will all be fine. It's quite abstract. Pregnancy is abstract. Until the baby's crying, you never know. So yeah, for me, it was a lot of leaning into faith. When I had these thoughts of like, well, who says I'm going to have a baby? Sort of trying to flip it around and say, well, who says that we won't? Some days it worked, some days it didn't. But just taking it not even one day at a time, 1 hour at a time. And if you're having a really hard day, honor that. I know not everyone can, but if you can take an hour out because you're really struggling, do that. Sit in a dark room, sit with your baby, hand on your stomach, whether they're moving, yet or not, even if you're really early on, just sort of like breathe into the moment of right now, we're still pregnant. We're still good. And that's all that matters.
Oh gosh, I love that so much. I love that so much. The being present and being mindful and really focusing on what there is right at this moment and trying to push the rest of the world away.
That really works.
I love that and love all of the pieces that you just shared. Malki, thank you so much for giving a little bit of yourself here, giving us the update on your life, the pain and the sorrow, and also the joy and the simcha and the beauty.
This is our 100th episode. Thank you so much for being here. Please bring yourselves, come into the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby community. It is an evolution of your soul to be here. We will support you every possible way, all the way through whatever journey your soul needs to take. Sending love.